For most of Mexico's modern history, children were everywhere. Big families, grandparents surrounded by grandchildren. You would always think of Mexico as a place that had a lot of kids. I definitely knew my fair share of Mexicans that had like 7 siblings. And for decades, that was backed up by the numbers. But something is quietly changing. The sounds of a younger Mexico are slowly fading away. Mexicans are simply not having as much kids nowadays, and the numbers, when you actually sit down and look at them, tell a story that very few people are talking about, but probably should be. Mexico is facing a demographic crisis. It's not a dramatic collapse. It's not overnight. It's a slow, structural shift that, if left unaddressed, will reshape this country's economy, its workforce, its cities, and its identity for generations to come. To understand modern Mexico, you have to understand its history. In 1964, the average Mexican woman had 6.83 children over her lifetime, nearly 7 children per woman. This was Mexico at its most fertile, a young, rural, deeply Catholic country where large families were not just common, but they were encouraged. And not just culturally. The Mexican government, up until the early 1970s, had an official pro-birth policy. The state actively promoted large families, banned the sale and use of contraceptives by law, and made abortion a crime. Then something dramatic happened. In 1973 and 1974, the government did a complete 180. A new law put modern family planning services into public hospitals and clinics. The state went from have more babies to plan your family almost overnight. The results were staggering. Between 1970 and 1981, Mexico's total fertility rate fell roughly 39%. That's one of the fastest fertility declines ever recorded in Latin America. By 1976, contraceptive use had surged. What was once nearly 7 children per woman started dropping to 5 children, to 4, to 3. Each decade, the number fell, and it hasn't stopped falling since. Today, in 2026, Mexico's fertility rate sits at approximately 1.87 to 2 children per woman, depending on which data set you use. That's the level a population needs just to stay at the same size. Mexico has gone from nearly 7 children per woman to right around replacement level, a drop of almost 70% in about 60 years. That is one of the most dramatic fertility collapses in recorded demographic history. In 2015, Mexico registered 2.2 million births. In 2024, that number had fallen to approximately 1.6 million. That's a 27% drop in just one decade. And COVID made it worse. In 2020 alone, births fell by 22% in a single year, the sharpest single year drop since records began. Mexico's current population sits around 131 million people. The median age is approximately 30 years, which right now still looks relatively young compared to countries like the United States at 39 or China at 40. But the youthfulness of Mexico is on borrowed time. Right now, Mexico's National Population Council projects that Mexico's median age will climb from 30 years old today to 43 years old by 2050. That's a 13-year jump in the average age in just 25 years. By 2100, projections suggest the median age could reach nearly 50 years old. And it's not just the average age. The over 60 population, currently around 12% in Mexico, is projected to hit 20% by 2030. That's just 4 years from now. By 2070, more than 1/3 of all Mexicans, 34.2%, will be over 60 years old. Mexico's government projects that the total population will peak around 2042 at roughly 123 million people, and then begin a slow but steady decline. The country that was growing throughout the entire 20th century will start shrinking within 15 years. Mexico still has a large working age population relative to its young and elderly. That window is closing though. By 2050, the share of children under 14 will drop from 26% to about 18%, while the 65 plus population will triple to roughly 24%. Mexico isn't the only country dealing with this. Far from it. But understanding the global picture helps explain just how serious this gets. South Korea's fertility rate in 2023 hit 0.72, the lowest ever recorded by any country anywhere. Japan recorded just 720,000 births in 2024, the smallest number in over 125 years of record keeping. Approximately 30% of Japan's population is now over 65. Italy has nearly 1 in 4 residents above 65 years old. China's population has been shrinking for 3 consecutive years. These aren't just statistics. Japan and South Korea are already experiencing acute labor shortages and have turned to automation and immigration to try to fill the gaps. South Korea spent $250 billion trying to incentivize babies, and it barely moved the needle. Italy has tried monthly cash payments. Japan threw billions at the problem. The UNFPA, after studying 14 countries, concluded that baby bonuses and fertility targets are largely ineffective. Mexico isn't that extreme yet, but it can see where the road leads, and the countries that are furthest down the road serve as a warning. Once you lose demographic momentum, it is extraordinarily hard to get back. So why is this happening? It's not one thing. It never is. It's a merging of forces that, together, have made having children feel less possible and something less desirable. Rural Mexico still has higher birth rates than urban Mexico, but Mexico has become a majority urban country, and cities change the math of family life dramatically. Kids are more expensive in cities, apartments are smaller, childcare costs are higher, and the culture shifts towards careers, personal development, and later towards marriage. Women's education and workforce participation has changed the equation fundamentally. Women who have more education and more economic opportunity naturally tend to have fewer children and have them later. Housing costs and economic instability are a major factor for younger Mexicans right now. Higher housing prices, job instability, and economic uncertainty make potential parents ask themselves, can we really afford this? And increasingly, they're saying not yet, or maybe not at all. Today, 68.6% of Mexico's population is working age. That's a strong ratio. But as that number shrinks and the elder population grows, Mexico's economy faces a set of compounding pressures. First, the labor force. Fewer young people entering the workforce means labor shortages in key sectors: manufacturing, services, construction. Right now, Mexico's relative youth is one of the biggest competitive advantages. Nearshoring companies from the US and beyond are choosing Mexico precisely because its workers are younger and more available than the workers in China or the United States. That advantage will slowly erode as the median age climbs. Second, consumer habits. An aging population doesn't just mean fewer workers. It means a different economy altogether. Spending patterns shift dramatically away from housing, education, and consumer electronics towards healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and elder care. Industries that have grown up serving a young Mexico will need to pivot or shrink. Third, and most critically, the pension and social security system. Mexico's IMSS, the main social security institute, currently has only about 23% of the working age population actively contributing. Only 41% of the workforce is formally covered at all. When you combine that thin coverage with a rapidly growing elderly population, you get a system under severe pressure. As fewer workers support more retirees, the math becomes increasingly unsustainable without serious reform. Automation and artificial intelligence could potentially offset the labor force squeeze in ways that previous generations could not imagine. Japan and South Korea have already begun deploying automation aggressively to compensate for workforce gaps. In Mexico, there's already momentum here. Foxconn's new AI server plant near Guadalajara and the broader nearshoring boom are bringing advanced manufacturing to the economy. If Mexico can position itself as a hub for AI-enabled manufacturing, doing more with fewer workers, but at higher productivity, the demographic decline becomes less catastrophic for economic output. A smaller workforce that's more productive per person can sustain growth even as the population falls. Here's the truth about all of this. Mexico is not in crisis today. The working age population is still large, the economy is growing, and the nearshoring boom is creating real opportunity. But demographics move slow. The decisions made or not made in the next 10 to 15 years will determine what Mexico looks like in 2050 and beyond. The question isn't whether Mexico's population will age. It will. The question is whether Mexico builds the institutions, the technology, and the economic resilience to age gracefully, or whether it gets hit by a demographic wave that's been visible on the horizon for decades. And this is Mexico Insider. Thanks for watching.